The night on Lysanine felt soft and safe, like a blanket pulled up to the chin. The colony school had turned the small playground into a stargazing field, with glowed pape lines and quiet blankets laid in rows. Above them, a bright comet cut a slow white scar across the sky. The children pointed and whispered, eyes wide, breaths turning to mist in the cold. Teachers moved between the groups with warm drinks and calm smiles, counting heads the way they always did. The dome lights beyond the yard shimmered in steady rhythm, the comfort of power and routine. Even the security drones drifted near the fence like lazy birds, their blue lenses blinking. Nothing here ever happened fast. Nothing here ever happened at all. Then the comet's light flickered, just once, as if the sky blinked back. A thin tremor rolled through the ground. It was so small the adults felt it more than the children did, a pressure in the feet and a low hum in the teeth. One teacher looked up, puzzled, and saw a second line in the skydark, sharp and wrong. The school's come, tower lights cut out. The yard speakers crackled, tried to speak, and died. A few children laughed at the sudden quiet, thinking it was part of the show. Then the dome lights in the distance went from steady to stuttering. The colony's normal night glow became a broken pulse like a heart skipping beats. The drones reacted at once. They rose higher and turned toward the hills, moving with new purpose. Their lenses changed color, scanning. A second later, one feed vanished from the teacher's wrist screen. Not static, not error, just gone, like someone had snipped a thread. Another drone feed blinked out, then another, fast enough to feel like falling dominoes. The youngest kids started to sense the fear before they could name it. They sat up on their blankets, searching adult faces the way small humans always did. A boy clutched his sister's sleeve and asked why the lights were playing tricks. A teacher gave him a smile that did not reach her eyes and told him to keep his voice low. A sound came from far beyond the fence, not loud, but heavy, like metal meeting stone. It was followed by a silence so deep it seemed to press against the ear. One of the older students lifted binoculars and froze. His hands shook. He did not say ship. He did not say alien. He only whispered, "That's not a meteor." More shapes dropped through the night, not burning like rocks, but falling clean, controlled, and fast. They hit the slopes and the empty lots beyond the school, landing without flame. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the ground lights near the fence went dark in a neat line, as if the darkness itself was walking closer. The lead teacher, Ms. Harrow, snapped into action. Her voice stayed gentle, but it carried like a blade wrapped in cloth. She told every child to stand, to take a partner's hand, to stay quiet. She did not shout. She did not run. She moved with the hard calm of someone who had practiced fear in drills and refused to let it win. The children formed lines, some trembling, some too stunned to move until a friend pulled them. They hurried toward the school doors, shoes scuffing on frost. A few began to cry, and the older kids hissed soft words of comfort, covering mouths, sharing coats. It was small, stubborn courage, the kind that did not look heroic until the world tried to crush it. Inside the school, the hall lights were dim and red, running on emergency power. The walls seemed narrower than before. The air smelled of plastic and cold metal. Miss Harrow guided them toward the storm shelter, a reinforced room built for radiation alarms and dust storms, not for hunters. Her wrist screen kept trying to reconnect to colony security and kept failing. When she reached the shelter door, the lock panel flashed a warning she had never seen. Unknown biosignature detected. 12 meters. Her throat tightened. The shelter was below. The thing was below. She felt her own fear rise, fast and hot, but she swallowed it down before the children could taste it. "Change of plan," she said, soft as a bedtime story, and turned them toward the maintenance corridor. A small hand tugged her sleeve. "Are we going to die?" a girl asked, eyes glossy with terror. Ms. Harrow knelt, steadying herself with one palm on the floor, and looked the child straight in the face. "Not tonight," she said. "Not here. Not while I'm breathing." The words were simple. They were also a promise. The child nodded like she believed it, because children want to believe adults can hold back the universe with bare hands. A low click echoed behind them. It sounded like a tool being unfolded. Ms. Harrow did not turn around. She pushed the children forward, faster now, but still quiet. In the hallway glass, she saw a shape slide past the corner tall. Thin, moving like it had too many joints, like it did not belong in straight human hallways. The first scream started, but an older boy clamped a hand over his own mouth and forced it back down. His eyes were wild, but he shook his head at the smaller kids, telling them without words to stay silent. Humans learned early, on playgrounds and in storms, that noise could be danger. They reached a service hatch marked for custodial use. It was narrow, meant for robots and cables. Ms. Harrow keyed the panel, but the power flickered and the lock refused. Behind them, another click closer. She had 1 second to be afraid, and she used it to think instead. She grabbed the emergency fire tool from the wall box and slammed it into the panel seam. Sparks spat. The hatch shuddered. She hit again, harder, teeth clenched, shoulders burning. On the third strike, the lock snapped, and the hatch swung inward with a groan. The children stared at her like she had performed magic. But it was only human stubbornness doing what it always did. "Crawl," she whispered. "Keep moving." No talking. The older kids went first, pulling the smaller ones through, passing them like precious cargo. Miss Harrow went last, listening to the sound of that not-human movement in the hall. It was close enough now that she could smell it sharp, like burned wires. As she slipped into the hatch, the hallway lights failed completely. Darkness swallowed the corridor behind her. Then a faint glow appeared, not from the school, but from something else, cold, green, and steady. It painted the walls in alien color. A voice murmured in a language that sounded like stones rolling in a metal bowl. The words meant nothing to her, but the tone did. It was not confused, it was not afraid. It was patient, like a hunter waiting for prey to tire. Miss Harrow pulled the hatch closed with shaking hands and dragged the manual latch into place. The metal vibrated once, as if something touched it from the other side. In the tunnel, the air was colder and smelled of oil and dust. The children huddled in a line, faces pale in the dim strip lights. Somewhere far above, the colony's alarm finally began to wail, late and broken, like a throat clearing after a long silence. It was a sound of help, but also a sound that said, "Yes, it is real." A boy at the front whispered, "Why us?" No one answered. Ms. Harrow stared into the dark ahead, where the tunnel bent out of sight. She thought of the drones going quiet, of the neat way the lights had died. This was planned. This was chosen. The cold truth settled into her bones. The children began to move again, crawling and stumbling forward, driven by fear and guided by quiet human hands. Above them, something walked the halls of their school like it owned the place. And in the night sky, the comet kept shining, beautiful and uncaring, while the colony learned the oldest lesson in the universe. Predators always think the smallest humans are easy. They never understand what humans become when the small are threatened. The tunnel carried the children away from the school like a throat swallowing secrets. The strip lights along the floor flickered, weak and yellow, and every shadow seemed to move on its own. Ms. Harrow kept her body between the children and the darkness behind them. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed low and steady, as if calm could be built like a wall. Behind the sealed hatch, something scraped across metal, slow and testing. It did not smash the door like an animal. It listened, waited, learned. The sound traveled through the bolts, into the children's bones. A small boy began to sob, tiny and sharp. An older girl pressed his face into her jacket and rocked him, making herself a shelter. The colony alarm above them rose and fell in broken waves. It was not a strong, clean siren. It sounded wounded, as if the whole settlement was trying to scream with a damaged mouth. Ms. Harrow watched her wrist screen again and again, willing it to show help. It only showed dead bars and a single red message. Local net down. In the tunnels, the children's breath made a soft fog, clung to hair and eyelashes and turned fear into something visible. Ms. Harrow counted them with her eyes, then counted again. She could not afford a mistake. The raiders had chosen the school first. That meant they had studied the colony. That meant the hunters were not lost. They were here for a reason. On the surface, the raiders moved like clean shadows between buildings. Their bodies were long and plated, their faces hidden behind smooth masks that glowed faint green. They did not shout. They did not waste motion. They placed small devices on corners and door frames, and the devices drank radio signals until the air went silent. The colony became blind and alone. The few armed guards tried to form a line near the school entrance. Their rifles were mining grade, made for pests and rocks, not for war. They fired at shapes that did not stay in one place. The raiders answered with nets that spread like gray water through the air. The nets wrapped limbs and tightened without mercy. One guard fell, choking, eyes wide with disbelief. A raider stepped close, almost curious. It tilted its head like a bird. Then it turned away from the guard and moved toward the school windows instead. It did not care about the armed adults. It wanted smaller bodies, faster to carry, easier to control. In its mind, the guard was noise. The children were the prize. Inside the school, a second group of teachers had tried to reach the storm shelter. They found the corridor blocked by a smooth black foam that ate light. They pressed their hands to it and felt faint heat like a living wall. A teacher raised a cutter tool to break it, but the tool's power cell died in her grip, drained dry in seconds. A child's laugh echoed from somewhere deeper in the building, high and confused. The sound cut off. The teacher's stomach turned cold. She knew that laugh. She had heard it at lunch, at recess, at every safe moment. Now it sounded wrong, like a bird call in a burning forest. She ran toward it, knowing she should not, but she ran anyway. The raiders used sound the way fishermen use bait. Small speakers dropped from their wrists, clicking and rolling across floors. They played tiny cries and familiar words in a rough imitation of human voices. "Help, this way, Mom." The mimicry was imperfect, but fear did not need perfect. It only needed hope. In the tunnel, the children froze when the first fake voice reached them through a vent grate. A whisper of "come out" slid along the metal like damp air. Miss Harrow's eyes narrowed. The words were wrong in a way she could not explain, like a song sung with the wrong heart. Shh. She lifted a finger to her lips and shook her head once. Hard. A boy named Kellen, older than most, listened closer. He had grown up fixing toy drones and breaking them again, just to see the parts. He stared at the vent and noticed the timing. The voice repeated every 12 seconds, exact as a machine. Human panic was messy. Human crying stumbled. This was a loop. His fear sharpened into thought. Kellen crawled forward and found a loose panel cover beside the vent. He took off his glove and felt the air. It was colder near the grate, and he smelled a faint chemical scent, sharp and sweet. He whispered to Miss Harrow that something was pumping scent into the tunnel. Miss Harrow's throat tightened again. They were being tracked like animals. She made a choice fast, because humans survived by choosing fast and bad places. She told the children to rub their gloves in the dust and grime along the floor, to smear it onto sleeves and hair. It was simple, dirty, and desperate. The children did it at once, trusting her. The tunnel filled with the smell of oil and old metal, masking their clean skin scent. On the surface, the raider leader watched through a floating camera drone the size of a fist. The drone's lens adjusted and zoomed, catching the faces of trapped people like a collector picking stones. The leader's voice was low, pleased, speaking to its crew in gravel sounds. It called the raid practice, and the word carried pride, not shame. A young raider asked why they were not taking the whole colony. The leader answered with a calm click, as if explaining a lesson. Adults fought. Adults slowed the work. Children were easier. Children broke faster. Children made the best fear. The leader's tone held certainty, the kind born from doing something terrible many times. One raider moved to the clinic, expecting easy capture, found empty beds, lights off, supplies missing. Someone had stripped the place fast. Another raider searched the dorm blocks and met barricaded doors and silent rooms. The colony was small, but humans had one talent the raiders did not respect. They could turn normal life into survival mode in minutes. A mechanic named Juno had heard the first tremor and reacted without waiting for orders. He cut power to half the neighborhood, then rerouted it through old emergency lines. He did not know the enemy, but he knew systems. He knew that silence could hide movement. He killed the lights that made people easy to see and opened paths only humans would know. A mother dragged her child through a laundry chute and into a service crawl space. She scraped her arms raw and metal, but she did not slow. Her child tried to ask questions, and she whispered, Breathe through your shirt. She did not say aliens. She did not say hunters. She only repeated the same words like a prayer built of teeth. The raiders began to show irritation. Their sensors found fewer warm bodies than expected. Their nets snapped on empty air. Their sound lures pulled only echo. The leader's camera drone showed a dark school and a missing cluster of children. The leader clicked in anger and its mask lights brightened, revealing a thin crack of something like a smile. It ordered a sweep with heat vision. A raider pressed a palm to a wall and released a slow pulse. The pulse spread like invisible water through the building, searching for breath, for blood, for fear. In the tunnel, the children felt a faint pressure pass over them, like a hand brushing hair. Several flinched. One girl bit her own knuckle to stop a scream. Ms. Harrow forced her mind to stay sharp. She studied the tunnel signs and arrows painted on the walls. Cargo rail, robot lift, power node. These tunnels were older than the school. They were built for machines and miners. That meant they had options, branches, places to vanish. Humans had always loved building hidden paths. It was in their nature. They reached a junction where two tunnels split. The left path climbed toward the water plant. The right path led deeper toward the mining lifts and old storage. Ms. Harrow hesitated only a moment. Water meant surface access, but also open spaces. Storage meant dark and messy, but it also meant tools. Humans were dangerous when they had tools. She guided them right into the deeper route. The children moved like a single creature now, joined by shared fear and shared purpose. Even the smallest one tried to step where others stepped to keep noise down. Their eyes watched each other, checking that no one was left behind. The raiders had thought children would be loud and careless. Far above, a raider found the damaged hatch Miss Harrow had forced open. It crouched, examining the broken lock with interest. It placed a thin needle tool into the seam and tasted the metal with a sensor. It picked up oil, sweat, school dust. It made a satisfied sound. It had a trail. It did not rush. It signaled the others with a tight beam of light, invisible to human eyes. Two more raiders joined it, moving with smooth confidence. They sent a small crawler drone into the hatch, a spider thing that hugged the walls and sniffed the air. The drone's sensors blinked, then turned and began to follow. In the tunnel, Kellen noticed a new sound behind them, faint but steady. Not footsteps, not breathing, soft tick-tick like plastic tapping metal. He stopped and pressed his ear to the wall. The sound grew clearer. Something was coming through the hatch, something small, something sent to find them. He whispered to Ms. Harrow. She listened, then nodded once, tight and grim. She did not have weapons, but she had human thinking. She told the children to keep moving while she and Kellen stayed behind for 10 seconds. The older kids protested, fear in their eyes, but she fixed them with a look that left no room. Kellen scanned the tunnel floor and spotted a loose maintenance cart, its wheels locked with rust. Beside it lay a coil of old cable and a box of salt pellets used for cleaning filters. He grabbed the cable, hands quick. Mind racing. Ms. Harrow pulled the cart across the tunnel and wedged it under a low support beam. They made a simple trap, the kind humans invented every time they had to stop something bigger. Cable tied tight, pellets spilled in a line, cart placed like a wall. Kellen's heart pounded so hard it hurt, but his fingers did not fumble. Humans could shake and still build. That was another thing predators never understood. The ticking grew louder. The crawler drone slid into view, hugging the floor, legs whispering. Its lens swept, found the heat of Ms. Harrow and Kellen, and paused like it was smiling. It moved forward. Kellen yanked the cable. The cart slammed down, crushing two legs and pinning the drone in the salt pellets. The drone emitted a thin, sharp chirp. Not loud, but urgent. A signal. Ms. Harrow grabbed a broken pipe from the wall rack and brought it down hard on the drone's lens. The glass cracked. The chirp turned into a messy buzz. She hit it again until it went silent. Her arms ached, but she did not stop until the threat was dead. Kellen stared at the crushed machine, chest heaving. He realized something terrifying and useful at the same time. If the raiders used drones, drones could be fooled. If drones followed scent, scent could be changed. If drones needed signals, signals could be blocked. The enemy was not magic, it was technology. and humans understood technology. They ran to catch up with the children, feet slapping softly on metal. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a wide service chamber filled with old robots parked like sleeping animals. Their frames were dusty, their charging lights dark. A faded sign on the wall read "Training Bay" in simple colony font. Miss Harrow looked at the sleeping machines, and a cold, fierce hope rose in her. Humans built things for work, for play, for safety. Humans also built things that could become weapons when the world turned cruel. She did not know if they could wake the robots. She only knew they had to try. Above them, the Raider leader's camera drone caught the image of the broken hatch and the dead crawler's signal. The leader's calm cracked into irritation. It had expected screams, not traps. It had expected easy targets, not resistance. It spoke the word practice again, but now it sounded less like pride and more like anger. In the tunnel, the children gathered close around Miss Harrow, eyes shining with fear and something else, something hard. They were tired already, but they were still moving. They were still thinking. They were still together. Somewhere behind them, the hunters were coming, sure of their strength. Humans had never been the strongest species in the dark. But they were the species that learned fast, under pressure, and refused to break the way predators wanted. The service chamber felt like a hidden basement under the world. Dust sat on every machine like gray snow, and the air smelled of old oil and cold iron. Rows of work robots stood in silent lines, arms folded, heads down, as if they were ashamed to be asleep. The children gathered close, their eyes reflecting dim strip lights like tiny moons. Ms. Harrow forced her breathing to slow, because panic was loud even when no one spoke. She moved to a wall panel marked "Training Bay" and brushed away grime with her sleeve. The screen was dark. She tried the power toggle. Nothing. Somewhere above. The colony shook with distant impacts, and the children flinched at every faint vibration in the metal. Kellen searched the room like it was a puzzle box. He found a thick cable trunk running along the ceiling, marked with faded arrows. He climbed onto a crate, ignoring the way his knees trembled, and followed the line with his fingers. "Power node," he mouthed, pointing toward a sealed door. His fear turned into focus, the way it did when he fixed broken toys. Ms. Harrow nodded, then pointed to older kids to watch the tunnel entrance. They did not want to be guards, but they became guards anyway, because humans stepped into roles when there was no time to ask. The smallest children sat down on the floor, hugging their knees, trying to be quiet rocks. A few wiped tears off their cheeks with dirty hands. The sealed door had a manual wheel, the kind made for miners wearing gloves in storms. Ms. Harrow gripped it and turned. It resisted, then gave with a slow groan that echoed like a warning. Cold air spilled out, sharper than the tunnel air, carrying the smell of batteries and metal heat. Inside was a small room of boxes, switches, and one emergency crank generator. Kellen's eyes widened. The generator was old, but it was simple. He could understand simple. He pointed at the fuel cell slot and found it empty. His throat tightened. No fuel meant no power. Ms. Harrow scanned the shelves and found maintenance packs, toolkits, and a crate of spare drone batteries. Each one small, sealed, and stamped with school inventory codes. They carried the batteries out like treasure. Kellen snapped open the generator's side panel and stared at the wiring like it was a map. He did not know everything, but he knew enough to try. His hands worked fast, guided by logic and desperation. The older kids helped without being asked, holding lights, passing tools, keeping watch. Ms. Harrow listened for the hunters, counting seconds like heartbeats. In the tunnel behind them, the air stayed still, but that did not mean safe. Predators were quiet when they were close. She looked at the children and saw how their fear had changed. It was still there, but it had edges now. They were not only running, they were building. Kellen connected to drone batteries in a rough chain and jammed them into the generator's intake. The screen flickered once, weak and hopeful. A thin line of power ran through the system, like a match touching paper. The training bay panel blinked, then displayed a single word in plain colony English. "Ready." Kellen exhaled, shocked it worked at all. A soft whir rose from the robots, one by one, like sleeping animals waking in a storm. Their eyes lit dull white. Their joints clicked as they tested movement. Children stared, caught between fear and wonder. These machines had cleaned halls, moved boxes, fixed pipes. Now they stood tall in the dark like silent guardians waiting for orders. Ms. Harrow stepped to the control console and saw the menu options were simple, meant for safety drills. Move cargo, clear debris, evacuation assist, training mode. She selected training mode because it sounded like practice. Practice was what humans used to beat fear. A map of the tunnels appeared, crude but real, with doors and vents marked in yellow. Kellen leaned close and traced routes with a dirty finger. He found choke points, narrow bends, maintenance ladders, and a floodgate that could seal a corridor. He also found something that made his stomach flip. The tunnel network connected back toward the school. Not directly, but through service lines and old vents. The hunters could still reach them from multiple angles. The two lookout kids stiffened at the entrance. A faint sound came from the dark passage, not ticking now, but a smooth scrape, like armor brushing stone. The aliens were closer. The children's bodies tightened as one. Ms. Harrow raised a hand, palm down, and the room obeyed. Even the crying stopped because fear had been replaced by listening. Kellen's eyes flicked to the robots, then to Ms. Harrow, then back to the map. He pointed evacuation assist. "They can move us," he whispered, voice almost gone. Ms. Harrow selected it, and the console asked for a destination. She chose a storage vault deeper in the mine tunnels, a place made to survive collapses. Two robots stepped forward and extended their arms, gentle and precise. They began guiding the smallest children into their care, not carrying them like cargo, but supporting them like a parent holding elbows. The children did not fully trust the machines, but they trusted Ms. Harrow, and that was enough. Humans often moved forward on borrowed trust. The scraping sound grew louder. A cold green light began to seep into the far end of the chamber, thin as poison. One of the older kids choked on a sob. Ms. Harrow felt rage flare in her chest, bright and dangerous. The aliens had come for children, as if children were nothing. That thought made her spine go hard. She looked at the console again and found a maintenance option. Security door override. It was meant to keep kids safe during drills. Now it could keep hunters out. Kellen guided her to the right corridor on the map, fingers quick. She hesitated only long enough to think of consequences, then hit the override. In the tunnel beyond, heavy blast doors slid down with a low thunder. The sound hit the chamber like a drum beat. The children jumped, but the doors sealed with a final solid clunk. For a moment, there was silence. Then something struck the far side of the sealed corridor, testing the barrier. It was careful again. The predator was thinking. Kellen scanned the robot menu and found debris clear, which controlled ceiling-mounted cutters and small track carts. He swallowed fear and selected it. The system asked for a work zone. He chose the sealed corridor. On the map, he marked a section just beyond the blast door, where the ceiling pipes ran thick. Ms. Harrow understood his plan without words. If the aliens broke through, the tunnel could be made to fight them. It's not with bullets, but with the environment. Humans had always used caves, trenches, and buildings to turn the strong into the trapped. The children watched the adults and older kids work, and something inside them steadied. A small girl, Mira, raised her hand like she was in class. Ms. Harrow almost laughed at the normalness of it, then nodded. Mira pointed to the robots and asked if they could make noise somewhere else. Ms. Harrow blinked. The idea was smart, simple, and pure human. Even terrified, a child could see a trick. Kellen found the option for audio beacon, meant to guide lost workers during drills. He'd set it to activate in a different branch of the tunnels, far to the left, and chose a low thumping sound that carried through metal. It began at once, distant and steady, like footsteps of a large group moving away. The green light in the sealed corridor paused, as if the hunters were listening. A faint stone-rolling voice murmured, confused by the new signal. The aliens had expected prey to run in a straight line. Instead, the prey was shaping the hunt. The children's small bodies had become a problem, and problems made predators angry. Ms. Harrow sent the kids deeper with the robots, but she kept Kellen and two older students with her. They were shaking, yet they stayed. That was the human thing. Courage was not a lack of fear. Courage was fear carried like weight while still walking. Ms. Harrow's jaw clenched as she watched the tunnel map. A dull impact hit the blast door, then another. The metal bowed slightly, then held. The colony had built these doors for cave-ins and explosions. Humans built for disasters because humans expected the world to hurt them sometimes. The aliens struck again, stronger, and the door's warning lights flickered red. Kellen's hands moved over the console, setting sequences, timing the cutters, arming the floodgate. He breathed through his nose like his father had taught him when fixing a live circuit. Slow is smooth, his father always said. Smooth is fast. Kellen did not know if his father was alive, but the lesson was alive in him. The blast door finally screamed under pressure. A thin crack opened at its edge, letting in a thread of green light like a knife. The children farther down the chamber whimpered, but the robots kept them moving, blocking their view with wide metal shoulders. Ms. Harrow stood her ground, pipe in hand, knowing the pipe was almost useless, yet holding it anyway. The crack widened. Something slid a blade into it, prying. The alien's strength was real, focused through leverage and tools. The door's locks began to fail one by one. Ms. Harrow signaled Kellen with a hard look. He hit execute on the debris plan. Far beyond the door, cutters engaged with a sudden shriek. The sealing pipes in the marked zone burst, releasing thick coolant fog into the corridor. It billowed like winter breath, turning the far tunnel into a white cloud that swallowed green light. At the same moment, a track cart slammed into place, dumping scrap metal and broken pipe sections into the corridor like a fast landslide. The alien voice snapped into harsh clicks, angry now. Shapes moved inside the fog, but their outlines blurred. Their sensors struggled. The perfect hunt became messy. Ms. Harrow felt a fierce, wild relief. It was not victory. It was time. Time was everything. Humans bought time with nails, with dirt, with broken machines. The blast door gave way with a final wrenching squeal, but beyond it, the corridor was chaos. Fog swirled, metal clanged, and the path forward was blocked. A tall shape stepped through anyway, slow and cautious, and the coolant fog clung to its armor, freezing into sparkling crystals. It looked less like a monster and more like a worker caught in a storm. Kellen triggered the floodgate. Water surged from a side channel, not enough to drown, but enough to push and slam and steal footing. The alien staggered, legs sliding on wet metal. It reached for balance and touched a live cable Kellen had rerouted. Sparks snapped bright blue. The alien jerked back with a sharp, shocked sound. Ms. Harrow stared, stunned. The hunters could bleed. They could be hurt. They could be forced to retreat. The fear in her chest shifted into something harder than fear, became defiance, cold and steady. She looked at the children being guided away and felt a protective fury that could power a city. The alien pulled back into the fog, speaking fast into its comes. For the first time, it sounded uncertain. The predators had come to harvest easy targets. Instead, they had found tunnels that fought, machines that woke, and children who did not break the way prey should break. Deeper in the mine, the robots led the children toward the storage vault step by step through the dark. The kids held hands and followed the metal guides, faces set with stubborn tears. Above them, a hunting party was learning a lesson it had never wanted to learn. In human spaces, even the smallest humans could turn into engineers of survival. And once humans started adapting, the hunt never stayed simple again. The storage vault door sealed behind the last child with a deep, steady thump. Inside, the room was meant for rockfalls and pressure leaks. Not fear, but it held. Urgency strips painted the walls with pale amber light. The children sat in tight groups, knees to chests, listening to the distant groans of the tunnel system as if the mine itself was breathing. Ms. Harrow stayed near the console outside the vault because she could not stand the idea of waiting blind. Kellen stood beside her, face smeared with dust, eyes fixed on the map display. The robots held positions like quiet soldiers, their joints humming soft. In the corridor beyond, alien voices clicked and rolled, close enough to feel, held back only by fog and barricades. The hunters did not rush anymore. That was the worst part. They tested doors, tapped walls, and sent small probes forward, then pulled them back when they met water or sparks. They were learning the tunnels the same way humans did, by failing, then adjusting. Every minute they spent thinking was a minute closer to breaking through with a better plan. Kellen's hands hovered over the control options, searching for anything that could reach the outside world. The local net was dead. The school comms were smothered. The colony's normal channels were either jammed or drained into silence. Yet the training base system had power, and power meant signals could exist if there was any path left to ride. He found a tab marked Emergency Beacon Test. It was not part of the school network. It was part of the mining safety package, installed years ago after a cave-in on another world. The beacon was old, stubborn, and independent. It did not ask permission from the colony grid. It only needed a spark and a frequency. Ms. Harrow's throat tightened. "If we light it," she whispered, "they will know where we are." Kella nodded, jaw clenched. "They already know," he whispered back. "But others don't." He pointed at a faded note on the screen. "Hard line to surface, relay maintenance only." A tiny chance was still a chance. He began routing power into the beacon circuit, but the system demanded an authorization code that no child should ever need. Ms. Harrow tried her teacher. Credentials denied. She tried emergency admin, denied again. The system was designed to be safe, and now safety was a locked door in a burning house. Kellen stared at the prompt, then at the wall where the old manual binders were stored. His mind snapped to a simple truth. Humans wrote things down. Humans planned for mistakes. He pulled dusty manuals from the shelf and flipped pages fast, not reading every word, only hunting for patterns in bold print. His finger landed on a maintenance shortcut, a backdoor meant for repair techs during blackout drills. It was not elegant. It was not secure. It was human, built with the assumption that someone, someday, would need to break the rules to save lives. Kellen typed the sequence, hands trembling, and the beacon's screen turned from red to yellow. A warning appeared. Test transmission will broadcast on all nearby bands. Ms. Harrow's heart hammered. All nearby bands meant anyone could hear it, including the hunters. But it also meant passing ships, deep relays, and the quiet watchers in human space. She looked at the vault door, at the children inside, and made the choice. Kellen hit send. The beacon did not send a long, polite distress call. It spat a short burst like a flare fired into the dark. The signal carried only Essentials location, colony, ID, and a phrase Ms. Harrow forced into the text field with shaking hands. Children targeted. Hostiles hunting minors. Request immediate intercept. The screen showed the burst repeating every 60 seconds. A pulse of truth. A pulse of anger. The kind of message that did not ask for help softly. It demanded it. The tunnel lights flickered as if the mine itself approved. Kellen swallowed hard, then added one more line. Simple, sharp, and human. Do not negotiate. Deep space did not care about most small tragedies. Messages died in static. Signals vanished between stars. But this burst found a path that should not have existed. Because the mining safety net was wired into an ancient relay mast on the ridge. And the mast still had a backup capacitor the raiders had not drained. The relay mast woke like an old guard dog, half blind, but stubborn. It grabbed the beacon burst and threw it outward, bouncing it off a nearby cargo buoy. The buoy, owned by a neutral shipping guild, did not recognize the code, but it recognized the words "children targeted," because humans had made sure such words were universal. Within minutes, the burst hit a civilian hauler traveling the outer lane, a fat ship full of water tanks and spare parts. The pilot heard the repeating flare and felt his stomach drop. He forwarded it without thinking because humans forwarded danger the way they shared fire. The message jumped again to a trade station, then to a patrol net. On the bridge of a human patrol cutter named Resolute Dawn, Captain Mara Ilyan heard the alert tone and saw the text scroll across her screen. For 1 second, she did not breathe. Around her, officers moved as if time had slowed. Someone began to speak, to ask for confirmation, to suggest protocol. Captain Ilyan lifted one hand, and the bridge fell silent. Her face did not twist into rage. It became still, almost gentle, and that was worse. She zoomed in on the keywords, "children targeted." She read them twice, as if they were a code phrase she had hoped never to see outside a training sim. "Lock course," she said. Full burn, her navigation officer hesitated. The colony was outside their assigned route. Captain Ilyan did not raise her voice. "Full burn," she repeated, and the words landed like iron. The hesitation vanished. Humans argued about many things. This was not one of them. She opened a secure channel and requested a response code that almost never left the archive. The comms officer's hands shook as he entered it. The code did not mean help needed. It meant species line crossed. It meant the rules were over. The system acknowledged and began pinging nearby human assets in widening circles. A frigate in refit status woke its crew. A medical ship spun up engines. 2 private security contractors rerouted without asking for payment. Even a research vessel, built for quiet science, changed course because the alert contained the one thing that turned scientists into soldiers, a threat to children. Captain Ilyan watched confirmation stack on her display like a growing storm. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She knew speed was mercy. She knew every minute in a tunnel could feel like an hour to a child. Send replies, she ordered, but keep it short. Let them conserve power. Her message back to Lysanine was only 6 words, plain enough for anyone to understand. Hold. Hide. We are coming. She sent it on multiple bands. Wrapped in encryption and redundancy, then again on a simple open carrier. Because sometimes the simplest signals survive the best. Back in the tunnels, Kellen saw the confirmation ping arrive, one clean packet that made his eyes sting. The system stamped it with a human naval header. It was real. Not a dream. Not hope. A ship had heard them. Human ship had turned toward them. Kellen's knees went weak, and he grabbed the console edge to stay standing. Miss Harrow read the 6 words and felt something crack inside her chest. Not fear. Not yet relief. Something like permission to keep going. She turned toward the vault door and pressed her forehead to the cold metal for a brief second, as if sharing the news through touch alone. The hunters heard the beacon, too. They did not understand the words, but they understood the pattern. A repeating burst, a relay response, signals lighting up like a web. Their leaders masked, tilted, listening, the green glow along its jaw sharpened. It made a sound like a hiss through stones and ordered its crew to speed up. The raid had been meant to be quiet. It had been meant to end before anyone important noticed. Now, the dark was waking. Now, the sky had ears. The leader clicked in anger and deployed more drones into the tunnels, sending them like insects into cracks. It instructed its hunters to stop playing and start extracting prizes fast. In the corridor near the training bay, the pressure changed. Ms. Harrow felt it first, like a storm front arriving. The hunters shifted from careful testing to aggressive motion. They slammed tools into barricades. They cut at doors. Their voices rose, no longer patient. Humans had forced them into hurry, and hurry created mistakes. Kellen used the console to move robots into tighter positions. He set doors to close in sequence, forcing the hunters into narrower lanes. Triggered another fog release, then shut it off, then on again, creating patches of visibility and blind spots. It was not perfect, but it was human, making order from scraps while under threat. Inside the vault, the children sensed the change too. The smallest ones began to shake, and the older ones pulled them close, murmuring simple words. "We're okay. Stay small. Hold hands." They repeated the phrases like a chant. Because humans use language to build courage when courage felt too heavy. Ms. Harrow finally opened the vault door a crack and slipped inside to speak to them. She did not tell them everything. She did not say Navy or battle. She just said, "Someone heard us. Someone is coming." A hush fell over the room. Few children began to cry again, but this time the tears were mixed with fragile hope. Above them, far beyond the ridge relay, the human response grew. Ships that had never met this colony now carried its name on their screens. People who had never seen these children now pictured them anyway. That was another human strength the raiders had not counted on. Humans bonded with strangers fast when the threat was clear, and they moved with frightening unity when the innocent were hunted. In the tunnel, the beacon continued to pulse, stubborn as a heartbeat that refused to stop. It was a broadcast that should not have existed under jamming and fear. But it did because humans always left a hidden wire, a backup switch, a last option for the worst night. Now the worst night had an answer racing through the dark. Captain Mara Ilyan watched Lysanine grow on the forward screen, a dull moon with a thin skin of lights. Most of those lights were failing. Whole blocks blinked out in uneven pulses, like a city trying to stay conscious while bleeding. The resolute dawn trembled under full burn, engines roaring into silence, and the crew moved fast without speaking much. A junior officer whispered that the colony had no proper defense grid. Another said the distress burst was repeating, steady as a heart. Captain Ilyan kept her eyes forward. She had seen raids, seen pirates, seen proud warlords who loved speeches. This was different. The message had one line that turned her blood cold and clean at once. Children targeted. She opened a wideband scan and saw the jamming pattern like a dark bruise in the air. Whoever did this was not a random predator with sharp teeth. It was a trained force with tools and practice. The kind that believed small worlds were easy. The kind that believed humans were slow to care about the far edges. They were wrong. Box them, she ordered. Not chase, not duel. Box. Humans did not hunt the way animals hunted. They closed systems, cut exits. They turned space into a locked room. The navigator began laying intercept lines that formed a tightening net around the colony's orbital lanes. The comms officer reported 3 more human ships joining the response. A frigate, a contractor corvette, and a civilian hauler that refused to leave, Captain Ilyan acknowledged with a short nod. Human unity was not always pretty, but when it mattered, it arrived like gravity. Quiet, heavy, impossible to ignore. The raider ship appeared on long-range scope as a thin wedge, parked behind the moon's shadow to hide its heat. It was already warming engines. It had heard the beacon. It knew time was running out. Its captain tried to slip away on a narrow vector that would avoid the main lanes, like a thief leaving by the back door. Captain Ilyan adjusted the net.
Ow.
2 drones shot ahead, dropping silent field buoys. The buoys unfolded like black flowers, spilling interference that twisted local space just enough to poison a jump window. The raider ship's drive flare stuttered, then coughed down to a weaker burn. Its escape path shrank. The contractor, corvette, older and scarred, swung into position without waiting for orders. The civilian hauler followed, slow but stubborn, using its mast to block a clean line. No hero talk, no grand promise, just bodies in the right place. That was human warfare at its most honest, simple geometry, enforced by will. Inside the tunnels, Ms. Harrow felt the air change again. It wasn't only the hunters pressing harder. It was the sense that something huge had begun moving above them, like distant thunder rolling closer. Kellen's console flashed new packet ship pings, intercept confirmations. Tight bursts of human code that meant help was here, and it was angry. The alien leader in the tunnels heard the shift too. Its wrist device lit with warnings in its own language, clicked in frustration, and ordered a final push. The hunters surged forward through fog and water, dragging tools that cut and burned. Their patience vanished. Their practice had become a scramble. A raider reached a barricade and forced its way through. Armor dripping, mask glowing brighter. It saw a service robot and struck it with a blade that hummed green. The robot's arm fell, sparks spraying. The children in the vault heard the sound and pressed their hands over their mouths, eyes wide, bodies trembling. Ms. Harrow did not run. She moved the remaining robots into a tighter corridor and sealed 2 doors behind them, creating a layered maze. Kellen rerouted power again, sacrificing lights to feed the beacon and the door motors. Humans had always been good at choosing what to lose, so they could keep what mattered. In orbit, Captain Ilyan opened a channel to the raider ship. She expected lies, threats, bargaining. The screen filled with a masked alien face, its voice smooth and careful, like a merchant selling a knife. It spoke of misunderstanding. It offered exchange. It promised to leave if given safe passage. Captain Ilyan let the alien finish. She waited 2 full seconds after the last word, because silence could carry meaning. Then she spoke in plain trade English, slow enough for translation, flat enough to sound like law. Return the children. Power down. Prepare to be boarded. The alien tried again, voice sharpening. It claimed the targets were units. It called the raid a lesson. It offered rare materials, maps, favors. It capped to make the conversation a market. Captain Ilyan's face did not change. Her eyes stayed calm, but the bridge crew felt the temperature drop. Humans negotiated for territory. Humans negotiated for money. Humans even negotiated after blood, sometimes, if both sides could be controlled. But there were lines drawn deep into the species, older than flags, older than colonies. Children were not units. Children were the future carried in fragile hands. He did not bargain over them. Captain Ilyan leaned forward, voice still basic, still quiet. "You harmed human children," she said. "This is not a dispute. This is not trade. This is a stop." She paused, then added the sentence that made the alien's eyes flicker. "You will not leave." The raider captain's mask lights flared, made a sound like a laugh, short and ugly. It threatened to kill hostages. It promised pain. "Gotcha." It tried to push fear across the channel like poison gas. Captain Ilyan did not answer the threat with fear. "Got." She answered it with action. "Cut their jump," she ordered. The silent field buoys pulsed together. Space around the raider ship turned rough, like water beginning to boil. The raider's engines howled as its drive tried to form a clean window and failed. The ship lurched, trapped in a cage made of math and human patience. The alien captain's voice rose in shock. The contractor corvette fired a single shot, not at the hull, but at the raider's external sensor mast. The shot was precise, surgical. The mast snapped and spun away, dead metal glittering in starlight. The message was clear. Humans were not here to win a duel. They were here to remove options. On the surface, a few surviving colonists saw unfamiliar lights streak across the sky and realized help had arrived. Some fell to their knees in the dirt, not in worship, but in raw relief. Others picked up tools again because humans did not stop working just because hope appeared. Hope was not an ending. It was fuel. In the tunnels, the hunters began to retreat in small bursts, pulling back to regroup. They were not used to prey that turned the ground into a weapon and the sky into a trap. Ms. Harrow took advantage of their hesitation and shifted her defenders deeper, keeping the children sealed and hidden, never giving the hunters a clean line. Kellen watched the map and noticed something that made his stomach tighten. The hunters were angling toward a vertical maintenance shaft that bypassed his door controls. It was an old miner escape route, manual ladder only. The aliens had found it through scanning or luck. Either way, they had a new path. He told Ms. Harrow in a whisper. She closed her eyes for half a breath, then opened them with the look of a person making peace with doing something scary. She assigned 2 robots to climb the shaft and wedged themselves halfway up, turning it into a blocked throat. If the aliens tried to force past, they would have to fight metal in a tight space. Above, Captain Ilyan's ship closed distance. Boarding pods armed. Med teams staged. Her tactical officer asked if they should accept surrender if offered. Captain Ilyan stared at the raider vessel and thought about the word practice, about children hunted for training. Her answer came out as plain and cold as the vacuum outside. "No deals," she said. "No passage. No soft exit." She paused, then added, "We recovered the children. Then we dismantled the capability. Humans did not always destroy enemies, but they destroyed tools that made evil easy. They removed systems that produced repeat harm. That was how they protected tomorrow." The raider captain opened the channel again, voice tighter now. It demanded terms. It demanded honor. Demanded a corridor to flee. Captain Ilyan gave none. "Powered down," she repeated. "If you touch one more child, we will open your ship like a can." The alien tried to read her face for bluff. It found none. The human bridge was quiet, disciplined, almost gentle in its focus. That quiet was the loudest threat. Human anger did not always shout. Sometimes it became pure control, a steady hand on a lever that would not shake. In the tunnels, the beacon kept pulsing. The children listened to the distant impacts and clung to each other, but they also listened to Ms. Harrow's voice when she spoke softly through the vault door. "Hold on," she told them. "Humans are coming." The words were simple. The promise behind them was enormous. The raiders had thought human children were easy targets because small bodies looked weak. They had not understood that human strength did not start in muscle, it started in loyalty, in systems, in a shared refusal to accept certain crimes as normal. That refusal was crossing space right now, closing around them. And when it arrived, it would not negotiate. The vault felt smaller with every distant, like the walls were slowly leaning in. The children sat shoulder to shoulder under amber strips, trying to breathe quietly. Some whispered prayers, some counted on fingers, some stared at the door as if looking hard enough could summon help. Fear lived in every chest, but it did not own the room. Mira, the girl who had raised her hand like class, was normal, crawled to the crack under a storage rack and pulled out a plastic school kit. Inside were small bottles for science lessons, tape, foil, and 2 flat power cells. She held them up, eyes shining with a strange calm. If the adults were fighting with doors, the kids could fight with ideas. Kellen sat by the console outside, but his attention kept snapping back to the vault window slit, checking faces, checking breath. Ms. Harrow saw it and understood. She opened the vault a hand's width and spoke low. "If you have a plan," she told the kids, "tell me fast and clear." She did not talk down to them. Humans didn't waste time with pride. The oldest students gathered in a tight circle. Kellen listened through the gap while Mara spoke with simple words. The hunters tracked heat and scent. They used drones, they used sound, so the kids would make wrong heat, wrong scent, wrong sound. It was a playground rule turned into war. If someone is chasing you, make them chase the wrong thing. Ms. Harrow's eyes narrowed, and her fear changed into something sharp. "Do it," she whispered. "But safely." The word safely sounded almost funny in a tunnel with aliens outside, yet humans kept using it anyway, like a stubborn ritual. She slid the vault door open enough for 2 kids to pass out with the kit and a bundle of rags. In the corridor, the robots stood like broad shields. Beyond them, the hunters' clicks echoed closer, now mixed with the buzz of cutting tools. Now the blocked shaft route had slowed them, but not stopped them. Ms. Harrow felt the pressure building. The enemy was not tired. The enemy was frustrated, and frustration could turn into cruelty. Kellen guided Mira and a boy named Tomas to a maintenance alcove with spare coolant packs. The packs were used to keep machines from overheating, sealed in thick plastic. Mira's hands trembled as she peeled one open, but she did not spill. She poured the coolant onto rags and pressed foil over them. Cold wrapped the fabric like frost. "Heat decoy," Kellen whispered, understanding. Coolant would flatten heat signature, making a body look less alive. But if they warmed other objects, the hunter's sensors might pick the wrong target. Tomas grabbed an old hand warmer unit from a locker, the kind miners used in winter. He turned it on and wedged it inside a coat. They shaped the coat around a mop handle, taped it into a rough child-sized figure, and placed it in a side tunnel near a vent where sound carried. It was ugly and simple, but hunters didn't need perfect to be fooled. They only needed a signal that fit their expectation. The raiders expected prey to be dumb. Humans used that expectation like a weapon. Mira remembered the sound lures, the fake help that had reached the tunnel earlier. She asked for the console's speaker access. Kellen hesitated, then routed a low channel into a maintenance horn system. Mira recorded a short message in a shaky voice, then played it through the horn in a distant branch. "Over here," it said, simple and human. Ms. Harrow watched the map as the audio beacon and the children's new lure created a strange rhythm across the tunnels. She was not proud that kids had to do this. She was furious, yet the work was saving lives. The kids were turning fear into tools, the purest HFY thing she had ever witnessed. The hunters reacted fast. Green glow shifted at the far end of the corridor, then 2 armored shapes split off toward the false sound. Their boots made careful, heavy taps, testing for traps. A small drone floated ahead of them, lens sweeping. The drone paused, sensing the warm coat decoy. It chirped once, excited, and darted forward. Kellen held his breath, then signaled Tomas. The boy yanked a thin wire tied to a sprung panel. The panel snapped up, slamming the drone into the ceiling. Its lens cracked, and it dropped, buzzing angry. Mira swung a metal wrench down with both hands. The hit was clumsy but strong. The drone went quiet. The 2 hunters stopped dead. Their heads turned in perfect unison toward the noise. They did not understand the details, but they understood one thing. The prey was fighting back. Their clicking speech sharpened, fast and harsh. They advanced, blades ready, moving with new caution. Ms. Harrow felt the line between defense and escape snapping thin. She ordered the robots to fall back, not retreating in panic, but moving the way humans moved in a planned evacuation. The robots guided the children deeper toward the vault again, then past it, toward another storage loop Kellen had marked on the map. As they moved, the children kept working. One boy scattered fine dust from a filter bag across a wet floor section, turning it slick like hidden ice. 2 girls pulled emergency glow sticks and cracked them, then hid them under grates in the wrong corridor, making false light trails that looked like people moving. and it was childish stuff, used with deadly purpose. The hunters entered the slick zone and one slipped, just a little. The armor did not fall, but the moment of lost balance mattered. A robot, following Kellen's command, slammed a door shut between the hunters and the main group. The door locked with a heavy clack. It did not trap the aliens forever, but it split them, and splitting predators made them weaker. Inside the vault passage, a younger child began to hyperventilate, eyes rolling with terror. Ms. Harrow dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead to the child, speaking slow. In, she whispered. Out, she counted with him. The child copied her. Humans passed calm hand to hand like medicine. Kellen's console suddenly flashed a new signal ping, stronger than before. It's not just we are coming, but proximity tags. Human ships were in orbit now. The tunnel system didn't show them, but the COM packet carried a time stamp and an intercept update. The net in space was tightening. The raiders were trapped above, and now they were getting trapped below. The alien leader felt it too. Its wrist device pulsed with warnings. Its ship couldn't jump. Its window was closing. That meant one thing. It needed a prize fast. It ordered all hunters to converge on the deepest heat signatures at once. The clicks changed tone, more urgent, less controlled. The hunt was no longer clean practice. It was desperate theft. That desperation made the hunters sloppy. A raider cut through a side panel without scanning first and triggered a steam burst from a pressure line. The steam didn't kill, but it blinded and burned. The raider stumbled, and a service robot used its heavy frame to shove it backward into the fog. Metal hit metal with a boom that shook the corridor. The children heard the boom and did not freeze. They moved faster. They stayed in pairs. The older ones kept the small ones centered. When a girl dropped her toy bracelet, she started to turn back, then stopped herself and kept going, jaw tight. Small sacrifices learned too young made the group survive. Mira, breathing hard, looked at Kellen and asked the question that mattered. How long? Kellen checked the latest ping and swallowed. Minutes, he whispered. It was not comforting, because minutes could be forever in a tunnel. But it was real time, real rescue. Mira nodded and turned back to help a limping boy. Ms. Harrow led them into a narrow maintenance spine where the ceiling was low and the walls were lined with old cable. She chose it because it forced the hunters into single file. Humans always loved choke points. They made the strong fight on the weak's terms. She set the robots to form a moving barrier, one ahead, one behind, like metal bookends. The hunters reached the corridor junction and saw the fresh signs of human tricks, broken drones, smeared coolant, false lights. Their leader's voice crackled over their local comms, furious. The word practice came again, but now it sounded like a curse. The prey had turned the lesson back on the teacher. A hunter forced open a door and lunged into the spine corridor, blade raised. It expected screaming kids. It found a robot braced like a wall and a line of children behind it, silent, eyes hard. The robot's arms swung not with elegance, but with weight. It struck the hunter's chest plate and sent it skidding back. Kellen triggered a power surge through the cable line at the corridor edge. Not enough to fry the whole tunnel, but enough to spark bright and loud. The hunter flinched and raised its arms. In that instant, Ms. Harrow saw something human and perfect. The alien was afraid of getting hurt. It was not a god. It was just a predator with armor. The children used the moment. They slipped past a side hatch into a smaller crawl path, moving like they had rehearsed it for weeks. The hatch shut behind them. The hunter slammed into it, but it held for 2 seconds, then 4, then 6. 2 seconds were lives. 6 seconds were miracles. Above them in orbit, the first boarding pods from Resolute Dawn hit the raider ship's hull with dull thuds. The humans didn't announce themselves with flags. They cut in clean, silent, and fast. In the tunnels, the children didn't know the details, but they felt the change in the hunters' voices, more frantic, less certain. Ms. Harrow guided the group toward a final safety pocket near the old lift shafts, where the air was colder and the metal thicker. She pressed her hand to the wall and whispered, not a prayer, but a promise to the whole human race. Hold the line, she breathed. Just a little longer. The children huddled, shaking and sweaty, but still thinking. It fought with tape, dust, coolant, and courage. They had turned school skills into survival. They had made predators hesitate. In the dark, that was what humans did best. They were not easy targets. They were the reason a fleet was breaking rules in space, the reason strangers were burning fuel to save them. The reason an entire species was about to teach the raiders what happens when you hunt the small humans first. The first human boarding pod kissed the raider ship like a hammer held by a surgeon. It did not explode. It did not roar. It locked, drilled, and cut with cold purpose. Captain Ilyan watched the live feed without blinking. Her team moved through the breach in tight pairs. Lights low, rifles steady, voices clipped to single syllables. The raiders fought at first, shocked that anyone dared to board them. They expected warnings, speeches, a chance to bargain. Instead, they met humans in sealed armor, with calm eyes and strict hands. Every human step was measured. Every corner was cleared. The message was simple. This was not a war for pride, it was a rescue. Inside the raider ship, the air smelled sharp, like chemicals and old blood. The corridors were narrow and angled wrong for human shoulders, but humans adapted fast. They turned sideways, flowed through, used mirrors and drones, and never rushed blind. When a raider lunged from a side hatch, a human shield slammed it back with raw weight and practiced timing. The raider captain tried to open a channel again, voice shaking now, promising return if the humans would stop. Captain Ilyan did not answer. She only sent one command to the boarding lead. Find the children. Secure evidence. Her tone carried something stronger than anger, carried a rule the universe could not bend. In the tunnels below, the hunters suddenly hesitated. Aircoms filled with urgent clicks. Our leader's voice changed, sharp with fear. Miss Harrow felt the shift like a breeze before rain. Kellen saw it on the map as motion patterns broke apart. The predators were no longer a smooth net. They were a tangled fist. Then the tunnel system pinged with a new burst, stronger and closer. And this one carried a human stamp. It was short, almost gentle. Rescue team entered hostile vessel. Hold position. Ms. Harrow pressed her hand to the wall, eyes wet, and nodded as if the rock itself could hear her. A final alien squad pushed into the maintenance spine, desperate for a prize before their ship was lost. Their green lights cut through fog like knives. The children huddled behind a robot's metal bulk, silent except for breathing. Mira clenched a strip of tape in her fist like it was a weapon. Tomas held a broken wrench. They looked small, but their eyes were hard. The robot absorbed the first strike with a shower of sparks. It staggered, but did not fall. Miss Harrow stepped forward, and pipe raised, ready to die buying seconds, when the alien suddenly screeched with a command. The hunters froze mid-motion, masks turning as if listening to a god. Then, with a bitter click, they pulled back. They retreated not because they had mercy. They retreated because they had orders. Their ship was being taken. Their escape was gone. The hunt had failed. The tunnel fell into a strange quiet broken only by the drip of coolant and the ragged breathing of children who had held fear in their teeth for too long. Above, the human boarding team found the first holding room behind a double seal. The door opened to reveal restraints sized for small bodies and medical scanners set to stress response. No children were inside. Only stains, claw marks, and a rack of numbered tags. A human medic stared at the tags and began to shake with silent rage. The next room held a data core wrapped in shock padding. It was protected more than the ship's weapons locker. That alone told the humans what mattered to these raiders. The boarding lead ordered a full mirror copy. Human fingers moved with careful speed, preserving every file, every timestamp, every face captured by the raiders' trophy lenses. When the core decrypted, the truth spilled out in plain graphs and cruel video. The raiders had been doing this for years. It was not a single crime. It was a program, a curriculum, a hunting league that trained young warriors by targeting the weak especially. The young of other species, because it was clean practice. One file was labeled in crude trade English, easy targets. Inside were colony names, school schedules, population charts, and notes about reaction speed. Humans watched in silence, because even a hardened soldier needed a moment to feel it fully. The raiders had studied bedtime routines and bus routes the way a butcher studied cuts of meat. Captain Ilyan received the evidence packet and did not speak for a full 10 seconds. The bridge crew waited, hearts pounding, because sometimes the calm before a storm was the most frightening thing. Then she exhaled and sent a single order across the growing human response net: publish the proof, full and unedited. Her officers hesitated. Publishing meant showing ugly things to millions. It meant pain. Captain Ilyan did not soften. No rumors, she said. No denial space. No bargaining. Humans had learned that predators survived in shadows and half-truths. So humans dragged the truth into daylight and held it there until it burned. The packet went out across human space in minutes, bouncing through relays, stations, and personal screens. It reached parents on inner worlds and miners on outer rocks. It reached teachers, medics, ship captains, and quiet people who never cared about politics. It reached them with one clear message: someone is hunting children as sport. The human response was not a riot. It was worse for the raiders. It was alignment. Governments that argued yesterday signed joint orders today. Courts that moved slowly approved emergency warrants in hours. Fleets that disliked each other shared fuel and routes. Humans did not need 100 speeches. They needed a single moral line, and this crossed it. On Lysanine, Captain Ilyan ordered medical teams down first. Not soldiers, medics. Because saving came before punishment. Rescue shuttles landed near the ridge, guided by weak colony beacons and Kellen's tunnel map uploads. Human boots hit dust. Human hands carried blankets, lights, water, and the kind of gentle voices that made children cry harder. Ms. Harrow led the children toward the lift shaft as the first human rescue squad entered the tunnel mouth. The soldier in front lowered her rifle when she saw the kids. She removed her helmet so her face could be seen. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "You're safe," she said, simple as air. Some children ran forward. Some froze, unable to believe it. Mira took one step, then another, then broke into a sob that shook her whole body. Miss Harrow's knees finally failed. She sat down on the cold metal floor, laughing and crying at once. Kellen stared at the human patch on the soldier's shoulder like it was a flag planted on the moon itself. The hunters were captured in pieces, cornered by sealed doors and human squads that moved like closing hands. The raider leader fought hardest, spitting sharp clicks, refusing to kneel. Humans did not execute it in the tunnel. They restrained it, tagged its armor, and recorded everything. Humans wanted punishment, yes, but they wanted lawful public punishment that could not be undone. The raider ship was towed into a holding orbit and stripped like a carcass in a clean room. Weapons were cataloged. Jamming tech was boxed. Data cores were sealed. Every trophy recording was copied for court, then locked away under trauma protocols. Humans could be brutal, but they were also careful with scars. Weeks later, the verdict was not delivered by one angry captain. It was delivered by a human tribunal broadcast across many worlds. The screen showed the raider captain's own footage. Played without sound at first, children running, nets falling, small hands reaching. Then the sound returned, and the raider's proud voice calling it practice. The judge did not shout. The judge did not insult. The judge read the charges in plain language so every listener could understand. Crimes against minors. Predatory training program, repeated raids, conspiracy across systems. The raiders tried to claim tradition. Humans answered with a simple rule: tradition does not excuse harm. The sentence was not only prison, it was dismantling. The raider species lost access to key trade lanes until compliance was proven. Their hunting academies were shut by force. Their ships were seized or scuttled. Their leaders were removed from border talks. The program was erased like a virus cut out of a network. Some humans wanted extinction. Many were too angry to see straight. But the tribunal chose something colder and more human: prevention. Remove their tools. Remove their secrecy.
Ow.
Remove their ability to repeat the crime. Let the galaxy watch. Let every predator learn that humans did not forget, and humans did not allow practice on children. After the broadcast on Lysanine, the school reopened with new doors, new lights, and a new memorial wall. Ms. Harrow returned to teaching, voice softer, but spine stronger. Kellen helped rebuild the training base system, adding true emergency codes and better beacons. Mira still raised her hand in class because she refused to let fear steal that habit. The proof had been shown. The verdict had been delivered. But the real message was carried by a simple moment the cameras caught outside the rebuilt playground. A small child looked up at the sky and said very quietly, "We were not easy." The words were plain. The meaning was enormous. And across human space, people repeated that line like a vow, because humans could forgive many things, but they never negotiated the safety of their young. The court feed ended, but the meaning did not. On Lysa 9, the sky looked the same as before, yet every adult walked like someone who had survived a storm and learned its real name. The colony rebuilt with hands that still shook sometimes. People painted over scorch marks, replaced doors, and fixed lights, but they did not erase the memory. They turned it into a warning. A week after the rescue, the children returned to the schoolyard for the first time. The playground had new fences and brighter lamps. A human patrol drone hovered overhead, not lazy now, but watchful and proud. The ground still held scratches where people had run. The air still held the faint smell of burned metal when the wind came from the wrong direction. Ms. Harrow stood at the edge of the yard, holding a clipboard she did not need. She watched the children step onto the grass like it might bite them. Myra took the first step, then another, and her shoulders slowly dropped. Tomas kicked at a pebble and looked up at the stars like he was checking if they were safe again. Kellen stayed near the building, eyes always counting exits. Then a small boy climbed the slide ladder, paused at the top, and looked down. For a moment his face tightened with fear. Ms. Harrow felt her chest squeeze. But the boy took a breath, sat, and slid anyway. His laughter burst out, loud and real, and the sound hit the adults like sunlight after a long winter. It did not erase pain. It proved pain did not win. Across human space, the story of Lysa 9 spread in a different form than news. It became a lesson told in mess halls, classrooms, and ship corridors. Not with gore, not with hatred, but with focus. Humans spoke about how fast the colony adapted, how a teacher held a line, how children used tape and coolant like tools of war. The galaxy listened, because the details were impossible to ignore. The raider species tried to call the tribunal unfair. Some of their leaders claimed humans were too emotional. Humans did not argue with that. Humans accepted it like a badge. Emotion was not weakness when it protected the innocent. Emotion was fuel. It was the reason humans built laws, backup beacons, and rescue fleets that moved before permission could slow them down. Captain Mara Ilyan returned to patrol duty without medals on her chest, because she had never cared about shiny things. Her crew did not cheer when they passed the orbit where the raider ship had been taken. They simply watched in silence and remembered the 6-word reply they had sent into the dark. Hold. Hide. We are coming. It was not poetry. It was truth with vengeance. The raider captain sat behind a field of transparent barriers in a high-security cell, its mask removed, its eyes dull with rage and fear. It had believed the universe was a ladder and the weak were rungs. Now it understood the universe could be a wall. It watched human broadcasts that showed the shutdown of its hunting academies, the seizure of its ships, the lockout of its networks. The worst part for it was not the loss of power, it was the loss of secrecy. Humans had made the evidence public. Humans had forced the galaxy to see the program for what it was. Every former partner backed away. Every border patrol tightened. Even species that disliked humans began sharing watch lists, because no one wanted hunters trained on children near their worlds. On Lysa 9, the rebuilt school added a new class called Systems Safety. It sounded boring, but it was the opposite. Kellen helped design it with Miss Harrow, turning the training bay controls into a learning tool. Children practiced finding backup lines and mapping exits. They learned how signals traveled, how jammers worked, and how to stay calm enough to think. Mira became the student who always volunteered first. She did not do it to look brave. She did it because she hated helplessness more than she feared pain. When a younger kid cried during a drill, Mira knelt, touched foreheads, and counted breaths the way Miss Harrow had done. Humans passed survival skills down like family recipes. A month later, a human courier ship delivered a small metal plaque to the colony. It was plain and heavy, with simple text and no fancy symbols. It listed the names of every child who survived, every teacher who held the line, and every colonist who hid neighbors in crawlspaces. At the bottom it read, "Not easy targets." The colony placed it by the playground gate. The galaxy kept moving, as it always did, but something had shifted. Predators who once hunted quietly began to hesitate. Rumors followed them. Humans did not forgive child hunters. Humans did not pay ransom. Humans did not bargain for safe passage. Humans arrived with nets of math, squads of discipline, and a moral rule that could not be bribed. Yet humans were not blind. They knew the raiders had not been alone. The data core had contained partial ledgers, coded transfers, and a list of clients hidden behind false IDs. Someone had funded the hunting league. Someone had sold schedules. Someone had pointed at small colonies and said, "They're easy." That someone was still out there. Captain Ilyan stood on her bridge late one night, lights dim, looking at a new file stamped with restricted clearance. The file was not a confession. It was a trail. A set of coordinates that did not match raider space. A payment chain that ended near a neutral trade hub with too many shadows. It was a kind of place where bad people smiled and called it business. Hercom's officer asked if they should pass it to intelligence. Captain Ilyan did not answer right away. She looked at the stars, thinking of the boy sliding down the playground slide. Thinking of the word practice. Thinking of how quickly cruelty tried to become normal when no one stopped it. And she spoke, voice quiet and flat. "Open a task group," she said. "We follow the money." Back on Lysanine, Miss Harrow watched the children under the starlight again. The same comet season returning like the universe testing them. This time the kids did not only point at the sky, they pointed at emergency lights, at new sensors, at the relay mast on the ridge. They understood systems now. They understood that safety was built, not wished for. Kellen stood beside Miss Harrow and listened to the distant hum of patrol craft overhead. He was still a child, still scared sometimes, still waking from nightmares. But he also carried a new certainty. The raiders had come for easy targets and found a species that treated children, sacred in technology, as a shared language of defense. Myra looked up at the stars and whispered, not to anyone specific, "Try again." It wasn't a dare born from pride. It was a promise born from belonging. She knew that if darkness came back, she would not face it alone. Humans might argue across politics and planets, but they gathered like a storm when the young were threatened. In the final broadcast of the tribunal summary, a narrator voice ended with one simple line. If the galaxy learned a rule it should have known already. The screen showed the playground plaque, then the rebuilt school, then the human ships sliding through space like silent knives. The rule was never spoken as poetry, but every viewer felt it. Humanity proved them wrong. And the story did not end there, because the last frame cut to Captain Ilyan's new file. The funding trail highlighted in red, and a quiet question hung in the air like a loaded chamber. If the raiders were only the hands, who was the mind? Who else was running practice in the dark? The narrator's voice dropped lower, pulling the listener close. Next hunt would not be in tunnels. It would be in boardrooms, trade hubs, and hidden ports where monsters wore clean clothes. The question was simple, and it demanded an answer. If the audience wanted the next chapter, they had to choose it. So the call went out, sharp and clear, like the beacon that started everything. If viewers wanted part 2, if they wanted to see humanity track down the ones who paid for the child hunters, then they needed to make noise where predators hated noise. Like the video, subscribe, and in the comments write the words that turned fear into a vow, not easy targets.